If you're looking for a comprehensive cycling program that offers strength and conditioning tailored to the cyclist, look no further than Brian Abers, CEO and founder of BriHop Coaching. Learn more about Brian Abers and his cycling and strength and conditioning program at brihopcoaching.com. That's BRIHOP coaching.com. Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, heroes and villains. I'm your host, Deshaun Fauntleroy. In today's show, the big idea is stress and competition. Show notes, links, conversation, and more at sportsmastery.com/39. As I said before, we're going to be discussing stress and competition. We're going to discuss my research, what I found, my notes, and just my general perspective and how I interpreted my readings and my research and talking to others in the stress and competition industry. So what I found is that testosterone drives competition. A high testosterone equals better team players. But we have a problem. We have a huge problem, and that's called the PR problem when it comes to testosterone and competition, because today we live in an age that when we start off playing sports at a young age, everybody has to win. There are no losers. Everybody has to get a trophy. But what is that doing for the young athlete that might be talented and gifted, that might be a 9-year-old that can play with 11 and 12-year-olds? Pretty much being stagnated. But I'll leave that alone right there. We can come back to that later. But as I said before, the problem with stress and competition is a PR problem, because we don't want people with high testosterone. We don't want people to be competitive, especially at a young age. But some of the things that I want you to consider is this: sports and competition evolved out of war. And what I mean by that is we had to create physical games to stay physically, mentally, and intellectually ready for war. And when I talk about games, I'm talking about two specific games that I have in mind, and that's the board game chess and another board game Go. That's all based on war, territory, and occupying space. So think about that. So what I want to impress upon you today is that when you compete, it actually makes you better. When you train and put yourself under stress, it actually makes you better. And what do I mean by that? You have two types of competition. You have adaptive competition and maladaptive competition. What is adaptive competition? Adaptive competition is where you train, compete, rest, and recover. And that equals good sportsmanship. But the flip side is maladaptive competition, which is long-term stress, where you have the coach or the athlete or the parent and the athlete, and they're just preoccupied with winning and losing or just playing games. They're not concerned, or they do little to no training, and they do little to no skill building. And what is that equal to? You get cheaters and you get poor sportsmanship. That's adaptive competition and maladaptive competition. And what I want to impress upon you today is that let's look at the history of war. Sports came out of war. And in general, your warriors were your athletes. All you have to do is go back to the history of ancient Greece and Athens, and you'll find that all of your warriors were athletes. All of your athletes were warriors. In today's show, the big idea is stress and competition being wired out of our DNA. Well, let's look at the ancient times. Let's look at our ancestors from a few different eras. Look at the ancient gladiator. Probably had to sword fight for his life. The ancient gladiator probably was engaged in a hand-to-hand combat for his life. And even when you come up to the Civil War, you got two lines, people holding muskets and handguns, face to face, and just charging each other with cannons. You don't have to face that kind of stress anymore as an ancient gladiator. Those Civil War times are gone. And look at our ancestors that were succumbed to slavery and the people that made those attempts to escape. Some made it, some didn't. But think about that stress that you had to have to get away from those dogs, the whips, and the chains. I don't want to digress here, but in modern times, let's take a look at the firefighter. You have to respond to a fire almost every night. You have to leave your family at home, and you have to be on point when it comes to fighting fires. You have to be on point with your teammates. No longer do we live in times where you see blood and gore. You don't see eyes being gouged out. You don't see people coming home being amputated. You don't see the blood and gore of war anymore. So you have war stress, which is life and death, and then you have competition stress. So what's the difference? War stress, it was all about life and death. Competition stress is something a little different today. But if you're in the right state of mind, if you're in the right culture, and there's none better than the Jamaican sprint culture, you can take a look at this in the book Goldmine Effect by Rasmus Ankerson. That's Goldmine, Goldmine Effect by Rasmus Ankerson, and review some of the competition principles that are created in there. And one of the biggest things I learned out of that piece of material is that you want to be around the best competitors at all times. The only way you can get better is by staying around intense and hungry competitors. But what does competitive stress do? One thing I learned is that it increases dopamine in the brain. And when you're under the right amount of stress, it actually makes the brain work better. Is competition being wired out of our DNA? That's the question of the day. So what I want to impress upon you today is that I want you to be intentional about your competition. And what do I mean by that? Well, I have a question. How do you maintain competitiveness in a large competition pool? It's millions of student athletes every year that aspire to be Division I athletes. And out of all these millions of student athletes, there's only 2% or less that's going to go on to play Division I athletics. So the question is, how do you maintain competitiveness in a large competitive pool? Some of the things I found is this. You have to have a training partner. You have to have an accountability partner. And you have to establish rivals. In the history of sports, there's always been rivals. But even on a smaller level, you have to find your direct competitors and compete with them. And just to make sure you're on the same footing, you want to get in a position where you can compete at a parity. And what do I mean by that? Well, you're competing with athletes that are a little less talented than you. And then you're also competing with athletes that are a little more talented than you. So you have something that's driving you, and then you have somebody else that you're aspiring to drive or to become better than. So think about that. Don't worry about where you rank nationally, but I would say try to be the best locally and in your region. So if you're in Oregon, how can you get to a level to where you're the best in the Northwest? That means you're the best in Oregon, Idaho, and Washington, and even Montana. Think about that. So stress, we're talking about stress versus performance. How does the body interpret stress? If we label stress as a bad thing, it seems to me that we're doing more harm than good. Because if you're going to label stress as bad, and what I always hear is, don't stress them out too much. It's too much stress. That's too much for them. So when you do get into a stressful situation, what's your perspective going to be on stress? It's going to be negative. So at the end of the day, if you label stress as bad, it is going to do you more harm. But what can you get out of it when you look at short-term stress versus long-term stress? And a basic example is this. A 4-hour practice, long-term stress. An hour and 20-minute practice with intensity and no distractions, good stress. So what you have to remember is that our perception of stress triggers our nerves and performance a certain way. Intellectually, what I found in the research is that we think better under stress. So what I want to impress upon you right now is I want you to be able to differentiate between short-term stress and long-term stress. Short-term stress, you're not going to get overwhelmed. You're going to train, compete, rest, and recover. That's short-term stress. Think about that. And at the end of the day, what I want you to think about is to put yourself in a situation where you can train to calm the stress response versus training to eliminate it. You can't eliminate it. You can only train to calm the stress response. And how do you do that? It's like I said before, you have to have training partners. You have to have people around you that are going to hold you accountable. So that means you have to have friends that you train with. You have to have teammates that you train with, people that you're near and dear to. And also, you have to do activities that are going to help get you better. And the last one is you have to learn the value of hard work. So that's 3 things right there that you can do to calm the stress response. Train with friends, do activities that are going to get you better, and learn the value of hard work. So this is a presentation that's definitely geared towards the student athlete, but the CEO can learn from this. The high-level executive can learn from this. The retail worker can learn from this, because we all have to work out. Even after your playing days are over, you can still work out. You can still go to the gym. You can still stay in shape. And what's the benefit of the gym? What does the gym have to do with stress? Well, the benefit of the gym is this. The gym is a place where you can go and put yourself in stressful conditions. What is that? Trying to lift heavy weights, getting in a bunch of reps, lots of sets, all this different stuff. It hurts, right? It burns, but you keep going. You might set a goal, like today I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. You set goals and you conquer them. You try to go above them goals. So the gym is a place where you can put yourself in stressful conditions. And what happens with stress? We were talking about this yesterday. I think stress is a good thing. It's a very good thing. Life is all about perspective, right? Now, stress can suffocate you, conquer you, or it can empower you. My background is football. I also played baseball, did some track, and later did some boxing. But football was my sport. And when I was playing, football was a very stressful sport. Why is that? Because as you get older, athletes get bigger and faster. I remember my first professional indoor football game. I was terrified. I knew the linebackers hit hard, and some of the opponents were coming down from NFL and CFL rosters. That's Canadian Football League rosters. And no matter how good and confident you are, there's always fear, right? That fear can paralyze you or it can empower you. Breathe it in. Use it for fuel. Use it for energy. That's what we do here at Sports Mastery. That's what I do with stress. So I like stress. Give me more stress. It makes me better. You stress yourself in the gym, it makes you stronger, right? It's the same thing. So anyway, in the gym, you get to practice dealing with stress every fucking day. And what happens? The side effect is that you get stronger. You start jumping higher. You start running faster. And you start to look great. But also, the bigger side effect is that you become a very confident person, a reliable person, a strong-willed person. And that's success in life, right? To be a confident person is huge. To be a good person, deeply rooted in hard work, is huge. That's so valuable. I'm telling you, use the gym to make you a better person. We talk about stress and going to the gym. You always hear this thing about overtraining. Don't worry about fucking overtraining. It's virtually impossible to get to on a scientific level. Just go to the gym, work out, and we are humans. We always adapt. If you don't believe me, ask a Navy SEAL about overtraining. They'll fucking laugh at you. So what is over? To go above and beyond, to overdo it. Train. You can look up the definition for that, but it's the same thing in life. And this last piece that I want to impress upon you, you cannot, I repeat, you cannot in sports or life. And trust me, I've been there. We've all been there, but you have to learn from it. You cannot get caught in an emotional state. What does that mean? Emotion or emotional state. The E in emotion means omit. Motion, you know the definition of motion. So what am I telling you? It means to stop moving. That's what happens when you're reacting and you're acting out of emotion. You can't. You got to think above that. It hurts. It sucks. I know it, but you got to stomach it. Even if you got to cry, who gives a fuck? Go cry, but come back and handle your business because it's going to come. It always comes. This is Sports Mastery, sportsmastery.com. How do you go deeper with sportsmastery.com? I suggest you listen to as many episodes as you possibly can. Download as many of my PDFs as you possibly can before you even think about going further at sportsmastery.com. I have a lot of great episodes, a lot of great PDFs that you can print off in color or black and white and put on your whiteboard or just tape up to your wall as reminders or exercises to do. The only place you can go from there is to check out my Sports Mastery Mastermind group. You can find that at sportsmastery.com/services.